First things first, I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. This is Nick Wright. I'm just going to say it. I'm in a great mood today. We have a great show lined up. Super excited. Kevin Durant, he's ready to build a statue of himself. The Vikings are making a big change, but we're going to kick things off right away with one of the more surprising stories in the NFL this season. The Steelers fighting for their playoff lives, having lost their last 3 games. This is a team that has made the playoffs the last 4 years. In fact, since 2001, only the Patriots have made more playoff appearances than the Pittsburgh Steelers. So who's next up for the Steelers to face? Oh, the Patriots, with possibly no James Conner and a banged-up Big Ben. No worries, says head coach Mike Tomlin, but he does know the road ahead will take a lot of hard work.
One thing that we're not going to do is we're not going to hope and wish. We're not going to go through our processes in the manner in which we have and just hope that the outcome changes. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to do things dramatically different, but we're not going to sit on our hands. We're not going to hope. That's not what professionals do, particularly ones in the position that we're in. We're going to actively seek victory. We're going to actively seek the change necessary to change the outcome of a few plays, which will thus change the outcome of a game. That's life for us.
So you see, Mike Tomlin sounds a little frustrated, a little angry, a little wanting to get back on the field pretty quickly. What changes do you think this team needs to make if they are going to get back on track?
Well, they just haven't had any type of consistency. And the NFL, it's always hard to win. It's hard to do it over a long period of time. Let's just go to the 2 weeks before last year's Super Bowl. The final 4 teams were Minnesota Vikings, Philadelphia Eagles, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the New England Patriots, right? Let's look at those teams collectively. Outside of New England, which they've been their consistent self, they're 9-4, all right? Let's look at the other one, the world champs. Tremendous NFC championship game against the Vikings, tremendous Super Bowl, they're 6-7. Jacksonville Jaguars got conservative before halftime, had New England on the ropes, had them scared, had them nervous, really played a good game. Oh, they're a stellar right now, 4-9. All right, those Vikings, 6-1. We talk about them a lot. We saw them in primetime against Seattle. So it's hard to win in this league. It's hard to win year after year. And I just took those 4 teams as an example because you would think, man, Minnesota, they went out and got Kirk Cousins. Oh, they're just going to build on 13-win seasons. Philadelphia won the Super Bowl with their backup. Now, their backup's a backup, and now they got their franchise quarterback back in there.
And Jacksonville ran it all back. They brought everybody back.
Oh, and added another offensive lineman so they can play more powerful football.
Combined 16, 22, and 1.
Yeah, that's not the way it is. Because teams will adjust to you. You can't expect your whole roster to have that same career type of year. Anytime when you go into the season and you franchise a player, he doesn't play, so you know you have less talent. He decides, okay, I'm going to sit out. Oh, okay, then halfway along the way, oh, I'm not going to play at all. So they didn't even have time to be able to make that adjustment because they thought at the minimum he would be there for at least half of the season or a quarter of the season. So now James Conner's hurt. So I'm not going to overreact, but you take out 2 of their running backs in this franchise, that will alter your season. If James Conner was healthy and they were struggling like this, then I would be a little more alarmed. I didn't think Pittsburgh just had that much more talent than everyone else, but they've been inconsistent. Ben gets nicked. If they win this game last week, if Ben don't get knocked out, they beat Oakland, are we in an uproar? No, they got the showdown against the – no, they can write their season, win their last 3 games, and they'll be straight. So they came into the season with less talent. Their margin of error was less than what they thought. They have struggled along the way. Defensively, totally inconsistent. Sometimes they get pressure on the quarterback. Sometimes they create turnovers. The biggest thing what they have to do against New England is New England since 2013, man, they score a lot of points against the Steelers, that being at home or when Pittsburgh's playing at home. So you got to be able to maintain long drives, keep Tom Brady off the field. I'm going to give you the same recipe I give all the rookie quarterbacks. Manage the game because Tom Brady carves up this defense. He likes the looks that Pittsburgh give him. They make tremendous amount of big plays. And one thing I know about Belichick, every time they play Pittsburgh, They're ultra aggressive in throwing the ball and throwing it deep down the field.
We're going to get into the matchup, but Nick, if there is a team that you say is about as consistent as any in the league besides the Patriots, you always say it is this Steelers team.
They are consistent over long samples, meaning they have made the playoffs. Like Tomlin gets there, they make 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, they win one of them. Their 2 down years are 8 and 8 years, and then since then they've made the playoffs every year.
They've only had 3 coaches in 50.
In 50 years. I mean, the last time they fired a coach, his name was Bill Austin, and the president was Lyndon B. Johnson. It was 1968. Wow. Like 3 coaches since then. So over large samples, they are consistent. Now, what we have seen is they are a team, as we talked about after the Raider game, that over the last decade, they have almost as many losses as a double-digit road favorite as the rest of the AFC combined. Like, they do tend to play down to competition, but then escape with a win. It's almost what they did against Oakland, where they didn't play very well. They drive down the field, they score, but then they couldn't get the requisite stops. See, to your point about the running game, there's only 2 teams in the league this year that have had more games with less than 75 yards, than Pittsburgh. The Falcons and the Cardinals. The Steelers, not surprisingly, in those games with less than 75 yards, are 1-5. Like, it is very hard to win in this league if you're not running the ball at least somewhat effectively, even in this passing revolution. Now, I think they're going to be able to score in this game against New England, because while New England has scored against them, New England this year on the road, everyone scored on them. Jacksonville put up 31. The Titans put up 34. The Bears put up 31 in the game New England was able to win. The question is, can this Steelers defense, which fell apart in the second half against the Chargers, which fell apart in the fourth quarter against the Raiders, can this Steelers defense get the requisite stops to stay in the football game against a Patriots team that's coming off a loss and understands that they're no longer just fighting with Pittsburgh. The Texans are right there, and it doesn't matter to the Patriots who gets the 1 and the 2 seed. If they're not one of them, they're agnostic about, oh, it's the Steelers, it's the Texans. So it's a critical game for both teams. For the Steelers to stay in position to make the playoffs, and for the Patriots to stay in position to do what they've always done when they've made a Super Bowl, which is have a bye.
Well, the Patriots seem to have had the Steelers' number as of late. Big Ben was asked yesterday why they've struggled so much against New England. Here's what he had to say.
It's funny because we hear that a lot, right? Like, you guys haven't had a lot of success against Brady and Belichick. Well, who has? Not a lot of people have. That's why they've won so many championships, and they're pretty good. So it's one of those things. It's a new season, new teams. Last year really doesn't matter anymore. We can sit here and say this play rules changed because of that play. That's those crazy things, but they won the game. So it's a new season, a new year. Tom's still the best of all time, and Belichick might be too. So. What an awesome challenge for us.
All right, so we touched on it. Let's dive in a little bit deeper. What is the key to the Steelers beating this Patriots team?
Well, at the most basic level, something they haven't been able to do in the last month of football, including their win against Jacksonville before this 3-game slide, which is play anything close to a complete game. In the game against Denver, the turnovers in the red zone ruined them. They were bad on offense in that game, scoring 17 points. Against the Chargers, we talked about it. The defense collapsed in the second half, while after the offense played great in the first half. And against the Raiders, I would argue they were shoddy in all phases. Maybe you'll give the offense a bit of a pass because they were on their third-string running back and Big Ben missed the majority of the second half. But the defense was, when this team was 1-2-1, we were like, man, they haven't recovered from the Shazier injury yet. The defense isn't good. When they turned 1-2-1 into 7-2-1, the story was the defense turned things around.
Right.
It's now back to the first quarter of the season as far as how the defense has been, at least in the second halves of these last couple games.
A couple keys for Pittsburgh. Offensively, they got to be able to get their tight ends in matchups against their linebackers and or their safeties. New England safeties are very, very good. But Pittsburgh, that's the advantage I believe they have. Get a lot of yards after the catch, typically New England. They tackle well in space. From a defensive standpoint, they got to get back to, I want the same resolve that Mike Tomlin had in that press conference. I want to get after Tom Brady, T.J. Watt. All right? I want Mike Tomlin to come up with a very, very aggressive game plan because this is basically their season. I expect them to bounce back at home. Last home game, all right, they had a lead that they had never relinquished that lead of that margin in the history of the football team. So I expect Pittsburgh, coach in the press conference, typically the Pittsburgh Steelers, and It's one of the great home field advantages now. I expect that crowd to be able to help that team out to try to get through this little slump that they're in now.
You mentioned the press conference. Every time Mike Tomlin speaks, I'm taking it back at what just almost power in his convictions he has. Like, you compare a Mike Tomlin press conference to what we've seen out of the other team in Pennsylvania this year, the Eagles and Doug Peterson's press conferences. If Mike Tomlin were to stop being an NFL coach, whether it's motivational speaker, secretary of defense, something where he just needs to get everyone's attention to one consistent goal. I mean, he's a guy you can believe in when he's talking to his team or the media.
Yeah, he's like that preacher, though. But we're having a building fund, and he's preaching about it, and we don't raise the funds. You know what ends up happening? We end up getting another preacher.
Okay.
All right? So you can only win so many of them press conferences. I'm a huge fan of Mike Tomlin, but it's time to put up and shut up with that, what they got in Pittsburgh with the talent they have, the franchise quarterback in Ben. That franchise has supported them long enough, all right? I don't keep track of the press conference. I keep track of the wins on the field. And right now, your team should be a lot better than what they are.
These are two teams, both of them coming off a tough loss. Both of them really want this. And as you mentioned, both have a lot of resolve. These are two teams and two franchises that bounce back. Which team quickly do you trust more in this game?
Oh, New England. New England going to give it to them.
New England, even though they've struggled on the road this year, New England has had Pittsburgh's number. And this, I don't think either one, you might say the Steelers are already eliminated, but I don't think either team can get to the Super Bowl without winning this football game. Because if the Steelers don't win this football game, they might not even win their division. If the Patriots don't win this football game, it's hard to see them getting a bye. So I think if you lose this football game, your Super Bowl aspirations are basically out the window.
I don't know how the Pittsburgh team will react to Mike Tomlin, but I know New England's players, they're nervous this week. They're nervous for their job. They're paying attention to every single detail. Why? Because last week, they made their coach look bad.
Yeah.
Because their coach had to apologize after a game. And I just know the level of respect that they have for things like that. It's just, watch the desperation for which they play with.
All right, we'll have Coach Mangini out here in a little bit to talk much more about this game. Coming up, can the Minnesota Vikings turn it around after firing their offensive coordinator? That is next on First Things First.
Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission-free. They strive to make financial services work for everyone, not just the wealthy. Robinhood is a non-intimidating way for stock market newcomers to invest for the first time with true confidence. Robinhood is simple and intuitive with a clear design that shows data presented in an easy-to-digest way. Here's why I recommend Robinhood. No commission fees. Other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, but Robinhood doesn't charge commission fees. Trade stocks and keep all of your profits. It's simple. Easy to understand charts and market data. Place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. Robinhood web platform also lets you view stock collections. Collections are like sectors like entertainment, social media, curated categories like female CEOs, and analyst ratings of buy, hold, sell for every stock. You learn by doing it. Learn how to invest as you build your portfolio. Discover new stocks and track favorite companies with personalized news feeds. Custom notifications for price movements so you never miss the right moment to invest. Robinhood is giving our listeners a free stock, such as Apple, Ford, or Sprint, to help build your portfolio. Sign up at first.robinhood.com. That's first.robinhood.com.
Let's talk some Minnesota Vikings. We spent a good deal of yesterday's This Here show discussing the trials and tribulations of Minnesota's offense, questioning some of the decision-making by first-year offensive coordinator John DeFilippo. Vikings had the same concerns. Yesterday, they fired DeFilippo. With reason, the Vikings had only scored 17 combined points in their last 2 games. Minnesota trying to hold on to that 6th spot in the playoffs with Miami, Detroit, and Chicago left on the schedule. CC, what was your reaction to the news?
It's hard to be surprised when you know the disconnect. And it's just a lesson in life for people, young, old, intermediate people, midlife, whatever.
Intermediate.
Yeah, because, some people don't like
midlife, exactly. Don't like middle-aged. We call it intermediate aged.
Bill Parcells, he says it one way. He says that Cris, as a football player, if you ever want to get your coach's attention, just do exactly what he says and do it with all the energy and might and in football intelligence that you can do it. People, America, if your boss asks you to do something, do it with all your might, all the intelligence, all the resources around you. Because simply in Minnesota, that's what it boils down to. Mike Zimmer wants to play football a certain way. The team is built a certain way. And he wants to be able to play. Even though they do play indoors, he wants to play a rugged style. He wants to have a top 5 defense. He wants to be able to have some playmakers on the outside. He preferred to be able to run the football. Yep. Now, the weakest unit they have on their team is their offensive line. This is a talented football team. They should have more wins than what they do, but it's for the style for which they play. You can't, regardless of who the quarterback is, you can't have a quarterback you're not going to support with a running game. And when the defense, which last year, number 1 in defense, this year, number 11, you move down 10 spots, let me tell you what kind of quarterback or what type of adjustment those offenses are going to have to make, because all those extra time you're on the field, all those time you're chasing points, you're not getting turnovers, you're not playing on a short field. That's not the way the Minnesota Vikings are built. So even though you do have Kirk Cousins, they didn't say when they signed him, they gave him the money. They didn't say they're going to back him up to pass 45 times a game. That's no recipe, because he's not supposed to be Aaron Rodgers. He's not supposed to be Drew Brees. He is an improvement from what they had, but they're just not managing his talent in that offense as far as Dalvin Cook, and the concentration should be on that offensive line, trying to be more physical, play action pass, because Thielen and Diggs, they have thrived with Kirk Cousins being there. So it's impossible for 2 receivers, young receivers, to thrive the way they have this season and the quarterback play not be good. It's the game planning and the lack of, I'm going to attack them down the middle of the field, either the tight end or someone else, and getting the ball to the running backs between the tackles, having a consistent rush attack.
And to your point about listening to your boss, if you and I take a car trip together and you've driven it before and you know the way, and you say, Nick, here's the way to go, and I say, no, I know a better way. I know a shortcut. That's fine. But if we get lost on the shortcut, you're going to be a hell of a lot more angry than if I went the way you said and we get lost. And John DeFilippo tried to say, oh, I know what you're trying to do. I know what you think. I know a better way. And if you do that and you're wrong, that's how you get fired 13 games into your tenure as the offensive coordinator.
What was the better way?
Well,
what did DeFilippo think was the better way?
Oh, pass is what he called sexy yesterday. Scoring points through the passing game, trying to be the 98 Vikings all over again.
Trying to make a splash.
Right.
Trying to make yourself more sexy for your interview and everything.
Well,
trying to listen to the talking heads and everything. Oh, he's the next bright, young mind. Really? Well, what he done till this point before we anointed him?
Well, listen, a lot of guys seem to ride the wave of the 2 games Nick Foles played in the NFC Championship game, the Super Bowl, as you were talking about earlier before the show. And I think Frank Reich probably got some credit for what Carson Wentz was turning into as well, as did DeFilippo, but really was about NFC Championship game, Super Bowl. Now everyone's getting promoted. But your point about listen to your boss, another lesson is when you get a job, you got to ask yourself, are you doing that job for that job or for your next job? Because if as soon as you get a job, you're thinking about how this job can position me to your next job, sometimes that next job don't come around. And I'm not saying necessarily that's what happened with John DeFilippo, but that's what it felt like watching. It felt like John DeFilippo was trying to simultaneously win games for the Vikings while make himself look good for his next job, and he just got this job. And so maybe the right decision would have been, hey, my head coach would prefer me not run the ball a smaller percentage of time than the Minnesota Vikings ever have. Let me mix in a few more runs. We do have Dalvin Cook coming back from an injury. We do have a quarterback who's new to the system, who, while has more talent than Case Keenum, there are also some weaknesses to his game that if we have the entirety of our offense be around Kirk Cousins' game, that might be a recipe to go 500.
A couple days ago, you made a really good point that the way the Chiefs and the Rams are playing shouldn't necessarily be considered the standard in the NFL, because that standard has gotten a lot of teams tripped up. It got the Cowboys tripped up. It seemingly got the Vikings tripped up. That not every team can subscribe to that recipe of just high offense, high octane, throw it, throw it, throw it. That some teams can be successful if they don't do that, and the Vikings seemingly fell into that.
There's not going to be a team that's going to be successful in the NFL this year. They've changed the rules, but let me tell you, it's gotten cold. That football is not meant to be played with in cold weather. Those offenses have slowed down to a halt. Watching the Chiefs game. 2 minutes left in the game. How many points they have?
17.
17. Watching the Rams. It was below freezing
They were held
in
to
Chicago.
6.
Did they score a touchdown?
No. And
all
the
right.
Saints the week before.
Yeah, now the Vikings got perfect conditions 8 games. So you have to realize you have to be such a superior passing team if you're going to develop that style. But the away team has the same advantage, because if you're going to play your game, you have to build the team around what the head coach wants and how you're going to play. They play in Green Bay every year and in Chicago. You can't beat those teams without a running game.
And the other, you mentioned the Rams, I'll bring in the Saints. Like, when the Saints were trying to play this type of football, nothing but passing, with a quarterback demonstrably better than Kirk Cousins, they're 7-9.
Yep.
Like, when Drew Brees' yardage numbers and pass attempts numbers are way down these last 2 years, because why? They got a running game. The best player on the Rams offense is not Jared Goff or Brandon Cooks, it's their running back, Todd Gurley. What has made Cris concerned about the Chiefs is not the injury to Tyreek Hill, it's that Kareem Hunt is no longer on the football team.
You're going to need a running game to be able to win. Yeah, it's nice to have all the rules. Yeah, this new NFL. Let me tell you, November, December, look at the numbers now. And that's based on weather. And also, these guys are paid millions of dollars to be able to slow these franchises down. And they're starting to get to the quarterback.
Yeah.
They're starting to figure that part out. And the points are way, way down than what we saw in September and October.
All right, let's take a break there. Coming up, how will history remember this Warriors dynasty? Kevin Durant has his own ideas. We'll talk some basketball. That's next. This is First Things First. Moving on, the Cowboys are the hottest team in the NFL right now, riding a 5-game win streak. Just a few weeks ago, though, not so hot. They were 3-5, with rumors swirling about firing their coach and making a quarterback change this offseason. Jerry Jones says this team is motivated by those early season struggles.
When you've had the downs, or when you've had the type season we have, it's almost like in life, growing up without any money or growing up in lesser circumstances. Once you've tasted that feeling, it makes you appreciate and makes you not want to go back there. And this team, fortunately, has had real challenges early this year. We have lived to tell about it.
Cece, yesterday on this program, you said you echoed just about everything of late that Jerry Jones has said. Is that streak still alive?
Man, Jerry,
He's making it tough.
Jerry can tell a story, too. And Jerry, if you know of his story, it's definitely a rags to riches type story. And those who have grown up with tougher beginnings, he relates to. And, man, he has a bond. He understands that. So I could see why he would use an analogy like that.
He's one of the few NFL owners with that story, by the way. The trajectory that he had and the beginning that he had compared to his other 30 peers across the league.
All right, so how have the Cowboys grown since what happened in the early part of this season?
Well, I think it's important to let people know, as far as the staffing, they had 7 new coaches this offseason. Now, Jason Witten leaving that locker room, Des Bryant leaving that locker room. So they had tremendous amount of shifting going on. We didn't calculate that before the season. Jerry realized his wide receiving room, his big offseason move from a wide receiver was to get Allen Hurns from Jacksonville, who was injured, who he thought could be a number 1. I thought he was going to be a number 1 there. I knew he wasn't a long-term solution to solve your passing problem. So Jerry realized, I'm not going to punt on the season. I believe that we're good enough. And with that young defense, but all the changes they went through, offensive line not playing as well, so they made the adjustments. He is right. They went through some growing pains. They are on the uptick. They are one of the hottest teams in the league, and they're getting better. because their passing game is getting better. So those types of things do fortify you as a locker room, and you do understand. Right now, I think in beating the Saints a few weeks ago, they saw their potential. So in saying that, man, when you grow up poor and you go away to college, you start realizing, man, there's nicer things in life. There's nicer places to live. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I believe these young players, it can be infectious. And I like how they responded after 2 big Thursday games, especially the second one against the Saints. They came back the next week and they were focused. Even though they didn't play great football, weren't making a lot of mistakes, weren't being careless, weren't getting a lot of penalties. So for me, them being focused and not letting that success get to their head, I like where the Cowboys are. And, Jerry, I hate to say it again, I echo.
Yeah,
but
you
Jerry,
agree with him.
I'm buying it, Jerry.
Right.
You got me.
It is not an overstatement, it's not hyperbole to say the Cowboys right now are the best at everything that they've been at any point in the year. The offensive line is playing its best. Its young defense is not as young anymore. Jalen Smith, his first year healthy, he's now 13 games into that year. Leighton Vander Esch, really good player even right when he came into the league, but now he's 13 games into his NFL career. Zeke is running the most effectively he's run since his rookie season. And obviously, as of the fourth quarter and overtime of the Philly game, we're seeing Dak Prescott. It's very small sample size.
That is a very, very, very
Of course,
small
but it's the most
size.
recent. It's the most recent thing we've got. He played the best he has played, and the reason that, even though it's a tiny sample size, you might be able to draw something from it is it wasn't a random occurrence. It was, the guy they traded a first-round pick for, Amari Cooper, he and Dak connected repeatedly to win that football game. I'll even go to the coaching staff. It's not just the new offensive line coach, the new receivers coach, Sanjay Lal. The guy who's been there, Jason Garrett, he learned from his mistakes early in the year. Too conservative in an overtime on a fourth down, lost a game because of it.
Went for it.
Went uber aggressive on a fourth down in overtime. I think won a game in part because of it. So the Cowboys right now are in all phases of the game playing the best they've played all season. Now, as Coach Mangini talked about, the key is, can you sustain that over the last fifth of the season before you get to the postseason, which is, of course, where it all is going to be determined how worthwhile it was.
I'll admit it. Nick was wrong. All right, moving on to the Golden State Warriors. Hasn't exactly been the start to the season that many anticipated for the defending champs. But Kevin Durant, not known for saying anything that could go viral, told Yahoo Sports something that could go viral. He said, I know for a fact that we'll all get our jerseys retired. We'll probably all get statues here in front of the Chase Center. We'll be Bay Area legends forever, meaning that people will recognize this team and this run forever in this area. I think that's going to happen. I think about 50 years from now, when they have our whole team on the Chase Center floor or wherever the arena is at that point, all the fans will be cheering for us and reminiscing on those days. All right, CeCe, let me start with you. How do you think history will remember the Golden State Warriors? The way Kevin Durant has it laid out?
I'm going to go to Nick as far as the history buff before I dive in because, man, I don't see a lot of NBA players walking around at 80, but
well, and I would caution everyone, not just the Warriors, building statues of people that are living is always a risky maneuver.
Yep.
So the retiring of the jersey, agree on. The Lakers got a whole bunch of statues in front of their arena. It's turned out great for them thus far. I would hold off on this. You never want to have to take the statue down, is my point. But listen, how will history remember this Warriors team? This is the greatest collection of talent in modern NBA history. You have Steph and KD, who are already two of the 25 best players in the history of basketball and not done yet, and climbing, and could crack that hollowed top 15, maybe even the top 10. You have Klay, who is a top 3 shooter in the history of the game, and I would argue a top 3 heat check guy that I've ever seen. Like, as far as his ability to catch fire and be unstoppable. To go along with, now we're on their 4th guy, Draymond Green, who is one of the best defenders of his era and one of the most versatile guys of his era. Only one team, since Durant's gotten there, has taken them to a Game 6. They've won every series in 4 or 5. So history will, assuming this year goes the way we think it will, history will remember this run as as dominant a stretch of time as any team has ever had, as dominant as Shaq and Kobe's Lakers, as dominant of what Jordan did in either three-peat, as dominant as what we saw from Russell's Celtics. They obviously did it over a longer period of time. But in this stretch of time, we've never seen this much talent and this much winning done. That's, to me, how history will remember this Warriors
You
unit.
said assuming this year goes as we assume it will. Do you think this year is going to go the way we thought it would at the beginning of the season?
I just think it's kind of puzzling to me why Kevin Durant would be talking about three-peating, why he would be talking about after the season, and it's December. That to me is just kind of puzzling. I've never, and I was traveling around with Michael Jordan. I happen to be friends with Michael Jordan. Ron Harper is a dear friend of mine, grew up with him. I never heard MJ talking about stuff like this. I think it's the greatest collection of talent.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as good as the run that Jordan went on, because the only thing that interrupted that was his retirement. So it was longer, his three-peat on one end and then coming back and three-peating on the other end, to me, was the most dominant time that I've seen in the NBA in the modern era. This is special. They're special. I wish they could keep it going. But with Kevin Durant, he's put this on the board. I don't know why he's talking about it. That does not help his legacy, talking about his legacy before he accomplishes it. So I would like to see how it's played out. I would like to see them compete against someone in a 6-7 game series. So it's really, right now for me, I don't know what their future is, so it's hard to say how many does Steph win? Because the Warriors' history is not going to end with KD if he leaves and everything. So to me, it's just idiotic to talk about where they are when Steph and Clay have said, man, we're staying here.
Well, and the other part of it is, if KD leaves after this year, what Steph/Clay and the Warriors do moving forward, and what KD does moving forward. Because I said all those great things about this team, and they're all true. But the only but about this run is how it came together and the circumstances in which it was, which is Kevin Durant couldn't beat LeBron.
Right.
And then it had a 3-1 lead on a team that theoretically could beat LeBron and lost it to him. And then that team had a 3-1 lead on LeBron, lost it to him, and then they came together. So for these guys, absent of the Warriors, but to cement their own individual legacies, what you would need to see is them get over that mountain separately. Either Durant...
I disagree with you as far as KD had to leave OKC because he couldn't beat LeBron.
No, he couldn't beat the Warriors.
Well, but you said he couldn't beat LeBron.
He hadn't beat, I'm sorry, he had lost to LeBron in OKC. They didn't get to play again after that. So I'm not saying, we don't know if he could or couldn't, is what I should have said. And they had played once and lost. And so my point is, we haven't been able to see KD in a situation not with the Warriors, just like we haven't seen Steph and Clay in a situation without KD, aside from the first year when LeBron's second best player was Dellavedova, them go head-to-head.
Right.
So we potentially could see that next year in the playoffs. We could see all three of them go against each other in different rounds.
Well, but you don't think this is a response to everyone making noise and bothering him about whether he's going to leave or not? And he finally said, no, let me put out a statement. Let me make a quote about how I'm going to be here for...
But he didn't say I'm going to be here.
He said, we're going to be on the floor. There are going to be statues of us here.
Yeah, but that's if they three-peat. He didn't say if we five-peat.
Yeah,
just after this year.
He said
when they're 80.
He said when we're like...
They'll be on the court when they're 80, Jenna.
Yeah.
No, you know what I'm saying? I just assumed he meant he was going to stay with the Warriors.
No, this to me was not...
No,
that's how I
anything
watch this
but
whole
that.
interview. He also said, he's like, there's not going to be statues of any of these beat writers. Like, yeah, guys, Katie.
That's so surprising that he had a lot to say.
People know,
Right.
Not a lot of people are like, I'm going to cover basketball for a living, and one day
they're going to
have a statue of me outside of Oracle.
Oh, coming up, he needs his own reality show. He is his own reality show. Can the Chargers upset the Chiefs without their top two running backs? It is a great Thursday night football game. We are going to preview it. That is next on First Things First. Welcome back to the show. Former head coach Eric Mangini is here. Coach, do you realize how often we make reference to or talk about you when you're not here? Do the ears burn? Do you go back? Obviously, you watch all 3 hours of the show every single day that you're not on the show.
I do study the show when I'm not here.
You study it. I know. I know.
What are you pointing at, see?
Me.
I appreciate it.
My friend right here, Coach Mangini, pointed out. Yeah, I keep giving him credit.
It's good looking out.
Oh, dude over here is a thief.
Oh, that's not accurate.
I listened to his radio show, Coach Mangini. My goodness, you would be surprised at the what do they call it?
The word you're looking for is plagiarism, but that's a lie. I do not plagiarize anyone.
No, I wasn't looking for plagiarism.
Never
You
invited me on the
wouldn't,
show.
Coach.
Right.
Coach, I want you to surprise. Listen to Nick Wright on Sirius Radio. It's not plagiarism. Watch the lies that he's saying. It's his take and it's our stuff.
That's what
Plagiarism.
it's not.
It's lying.
It's not plagiarism.
It's just taking
someone else's
No,
information.
it's different when it's words. Plagiarism when you write it down.
No, you're thinking of
That's when
libel
you.
and
That's what they
slander.
got you at Syracuse
He's
for.
not talking libel and slander. Thursday
Yep,
Night Football
that's what you got
serving
kicked
up.
out of broadcasting school. You had to make that
Arguably-
donation
You're
for
the
them
one
to-
that got kicked out of school.
All right.
Take that.
It was for being good. though.
Thursday night. Here we go. The Chargers heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. The veteran Philip Rivers looking to take down the young gun Pat Mahomes to keep the Chargers' hopes alive for the 1 seed. But they will likely have to do that without their top 2 running backs, Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. All right, Coach. Nick needs more ideas to steal for his radio show. How do the Chargers beat the Chiefs?
They
given
should
their
have kicked you
injuries?
out, and then the world would have been saved from you.
We love Nick. We need more Nick in our lives, not less.
Look, one of the things I've liked that people have done against Patrick Mahomes, and I know Nick and I disagree on this, but it's bringing the pressure. And I think the ability to bring pressure, but also bring it predominantly from his right side. So if you're going to lose contain, make sure that he's going to his left. But that consistent pressure, ideally pressure that keeps him within the pocket, that forces him to make even quicker decisions, not be able to extend plays. And then if you're going to play coverage, play split safety coverage. Give up the run, and I don't mean dramatically give up the run, but concede more running plays than passing plays, and double their 2 key guys, and hit Kelsey every time you can at the line of scrimmage. To me, that would be the approach. Force them to beat you running the ball, or at least slow down the game where they have to run the ball.
So you and I were talking off the air about Pat Mahomes under pressure, and the point that I was making then and I'll make now is every quarterback is markedly worse when under pressure than not under pressure. So Mahomes this year is a 67 passer rating when pressured. That sounds awful. It's 18th in the NFL, so it's just below league average. He also has the 2nd most pass yards in the NFL when pressured and the 5th most touchdown passes in the NFL when pressured. He still has the ability to make big plays. The problem is he's got 7 of his 11 interceptions that he's thrown all year have been when he's been pressured. So if you're going to get him to make a mistake, and that doesn't incorporate the strip sacks that I know we've talked about before, he is much more prone to make a mistake when pressured. But what those numbers also show you is if you bring the pressure and you don't get to him, you are leaving yourself susceptible to a big play down the field, as he's repeatedly done.
Right, but we know that if you just play coverage, he's gotten a ton of big plays down the field. At least by bringing the pressure, you're forcing the issue, and you've got the opportunity to create some turnovers. Now, you mix that in, ideally, with some disguise, so it looks like pressure, and you play coverage, and then double the 2 key guys, and make sure that every time Kelsey releases, someone's hitting him. No clean releases. Hit him, hit him, hit him, and hit him some more.
I'm going back to Coach's game plan, the game plan New England adopted when the greatest show on turf. And in that game, we had never seen wide receivers, tight ends, running backs get jammed at the line of scrimmage the way that New England did in that game. I'm going to double that because not only Kelsey, because we have one of them old-fashioned matchups. Kelsey, I believe, best tight end in pro football. And Derwin James, man, he is going to be a star in this league for a long time. The rookie safety from Florida State that is leading that Chargers defense with that pass rush. Also, Tyreek Hill, he's got a foot problem. Now, he's a small guy, and he wears these little soccer cleats. And Kansas City, that surface is not the best surface. Might be rain on Thursday night. So anytime you have a small guy, because he's not going to wear the wider bottom cleats because they're heavier, and most little guys, they say that they don't like to play football in those cleats. So I want to watch him and watch his foot problem, but I'm going to jam him at the line of scrimmage. And if I'm able to do that, I don't think he's going to be able to make it through that game. Late in that game, Baltimore, they should have been jamming him at the line of scrimmage. When he was hobbling around, he hobbled around to be able to make that last play, to be able to get him in and ultimately get that touchdown to be able to tie up the game. So I have to be physical if I'm the Chargers. And Philip Rivers, I'm putting this game in his hands. I might throw the ball 50 times. All right? He is a modern-day John Wayne, doesn't get the credit, but I believe he could dice up the secondary of the Chiefs. I believe that's the way for them to be able to win this football game.
Yeah, and with Philip Rivers, the key thing for him is not to press it too much, not to make that key error, that key interception. He is fantastic, and he's been fantastic against Kansas City. And in the first game of the season, he had an unbelievable, what was it, fourth quarter. I think the numbers were pretty staggering. But just make sure that, from his perspective, just by doing what he's done throughout the course of the season, that's going to be good enough. Don't press something. Don't force something.
And I expect, especially without the running game, I expect to throw a lot of short passes. But that's my number one way to try to be able to keep that Kansas City offense off the field is by putting the ball in their best players' hands.
You mentioned this earlier, but tell me why this time of year weather is such a factor. If you take the rain out of it, just the cold, how weather really fares into this.
Every football team I've ever been on, the coaches train us that you're going to have some bad weather. And inclement weather, that football, when it gets below freezing, Wilson, they make the best football in the world. But the surface of the ball changes. The ball becomes with a little gloss over it. It's hard to handle. You can't throw it as well. And, man, people are injured at the end of the season. It's hard to have continuity. People, they have a recipe for your best stuff. They know what you're great at, so they take that away from you. But football was meant to be played in the elements, and we have seen, yes, NFL highest scoring September, October ever. But since November, we have seen the best offenses. Let's go even with the Saints in perfect conditions in Dallas, struggle. Rams, Sunday night, struggle. Kansas City last week, 17 points with 2 minutes to go. So I thought there would be a correction. Man, football is hard to play, and it's harder to play when it's cold. It's harder to play offensive football.
And one of the things about the best teams and the best players is they learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's a hard thing to do, whether it's cold or playing through injuries or any of those different situations.
But isn't that
the great ones have a way to push through that?
Isn't that why that Baltimore game was so impressive? Your number one running back's being cut. Your number two running back is knocked out of the game. Maybe your best offensive lineman, Cameron Irving, he's out of the game. Sammy Watkins didn't play. Tyreek Hill is, like you said, limping around. They are playing the number one defense in football. Mahomes is struggling mightily in the third and into the fourth quarter, and they still found a way to win.
Their defense won that game. That was impressive.
Their defense won that game?
How'd they get the ball back?
Yeah, but they didn't even score when they got the ball back. Like you're talking about the strip sack after they had tied it up. I didn't feel like the defense won the game because I understand the defense put them in position.
Absolutely, their defense has been so bad. To say, man, they was going to only give up 20-something points, like.
But when you know you're playing a team that's never going to pass, as we talked,
they're 30th in defense, right?
Yeah, overall, absolutely. No. But I didn't think. I don't think
their offense didn't keep them in the game.
Okay,
I mean, you said Patty Mahomes was playing awful. What kept him in the game?
Okay, so they scored 17 points in the first half, and then they didn't score at all until the end of the game. I don't think holding the Ravens to 24
That was the most
is
surprising thing about me. Their defense held up. Their defense made enough plays for them. That's how to me they were able to get through that game.
Okay. All right, that's not that. I thought the defense played fine. I don't think holding the Ravens to 24 is a great accomplishment. I think they're going to run on you with Lamar Jackson. They ran successfully. They weren't able to make enough big plays. One last note on this. If the Chiefs have owned their division pre-Pat Mahomes, unlike any team in the NFL. Last 21 divisional games, they are 20-1. That was one of the things you liked about Alex Smith. We'll see if that trend continues on Thursday. If it does, they essentially lock up the 1 seed.
Quick last thought, Coach?
I'm excited to see what he does. I mean, this has serious playoff implications.
Right.
And this is another step in his development.
All right, that was quicker than either of these guys have ever. I wasn't prepared. I was like, I'm going to sit back and make something here. Coach, stick around. Coming up, can the Vikings turn it around after yesterday's coaching shakeup? That's next on First Things First. Back here with Coach Mangini. Look here, guys. We spent a good deal of yesterday's show discussing the trials and tribulations of Minnesota's offense. We questioned some of the decision-making by first-year offensive coordinator John DeFilippo. Maybe, just maybe the team was watching First Things First. Vikings had the same concerns, and yesterday they fired DeFilippo with reason. Vikings had only scored 17 combined points in their last 2 games. Now Minnesota trying to hold on to that 6th spot in the playoffs with Miami, Detroit, and Chicago left on the schedule. Coach, what was your reaction to this firing?
I really like Mike Zimmer, and I don't think that Mike does things in a rash way. And when you hear the things that he said in his interview where It's important for him to develop coaches. He hired a guy. It's important for him to help him. I really feel those were sincere comments and that it was a difficult decision for him to make. And I also understand the fact that he wanted to shake things up, and this is the time, this is the window that they had. Yeah, I'm not a big believer in firing coaches during the season. I've never thought that that's an effective way to go, but I do understand his thought process. If you ask your coordinator for something and you feel like you're not getting it, then things have to change. And I don't know if that's exactly what the case, but as you heard the comments over the last month or so, it felt that there was a disconnect between the two, and that disconnect had to be resolved, and he felt this is the best way to resolve it.
When you say, when you ask your coordinator for something, what you're talking about is if it was the case that he wanted them to be more dedicated to the run, not historically non-dedicated to the run, and he was just week after week not seeing that in the offensive game.
Yeah, you know, I had a situation with the coordinator one time where I said, I don't want to use the tight end in pass protection against this defensive end because it's a mismatch and tight ends aren't very good, especially in a three-point stance. And we did it the next game, and I brought the guy in and I said, look, maybe something I said wasn't clear, but let me explain this to you. If it happens again, it's going to be the last time. It's going to be the last time. And Bill told me a long time ago, look, if you are, you need to go home and be happy with your assistant coaches. And if they're not happy with you, tell them to go get their own head coaching job. And at the end of the day, the owner needs to be happy. And if you're not happy about that, go buy your own team. And that's the way it works. That's the way it works. So if he wanted something and didn't get it, and then explained it again and didn't get it, then it's time to find someone who's going to give it to you.
Did you, I'm not asking for specifics here, but in your time coaching either as an assistant, a coordinator, or a head coach, or just observing the league, get the feeling that there are certain guys that as soon as they got a job were looking for the next job? And by that, I mean, like, thinking about, how, okay, I'm trying to do this job, but I also want to see how this can position me for the promotion or the next gig.
Yeah, and I'm not going to comment on this specific situation because I don't know, but yes, that's absolutely a situation where you're auditioning to be an offensive coordinator, and sometimes the trick plays are in vogue right now. The Philly special, the Santa Claus, so, you know, whatever. There's a million names for these players. Yeah, one of my favorites. And so some of it is what's in vogue, what's going to get me noticed, what's going to get. This is the head coaching carousel time. What's going to get me on the radar screen? But that's inherently selfish. And you ask players all the time to put their own self-interest beneath the team's best interest. And the coaches should be out in front in doing that at all times.
Yeah, I was in Minnesota when Dennis Green, he fired the offensive coordinator. Jack Burns fired him right on the spot, doing exactly what you talked about. Denny Green wanted to run the offense a certain way. Jack had a certain ideology that he wanted to change the offense and put his spin on it, because a lot of these offenses, they say, oh, I'm a West Coast, and oh, I'm a play action, oh, I'm from Norv Turner, Ernie Zambezi. But every offense has the personality of the guy calling it. Defenses, too. You can be a 34, you can be a 43, you can be a nickel, dime, whatever, but the personality of that person will be on that offense. Brian Billick, he was appointed from tight end coach to being the coordinator. Now, Brian and I used to talk, and Brian taught me a lot of football. And Brian, he was ambitious at a young age. Ultimately ended up being a Super Bowl champion as a head coach in Baltimore. But Brian said, I ain't going to be no fool. I just watched a guy get shot by Dennis Green. I'm not going to try to impress. Now, I do have some concepts and some things that I believe our personnel is better suited for. And he immediately changed that. But in establishing what the coach wanted, that was the number one thing. And then once Brian became high-flying, we started breaking records, then Brian started applying for jobs, but not in that order as far, because he had the talent, we had a great system, and he established himself what the coach wanted. And him and Dennis Green were in cahoots as far as resurrecting our offense, which ultimately led to us breaking all those records in Minnesota.
And if you look at the Hugh Jackson, Todd Haley thing, Hugh had every right to ask for what he wanted to ask for. That was his role. Now, if he wasn't in a position to get it, then that whole thing was set up for failure from the start. And you can have an honest conversation with someone coming in, and things can change. But as the head coach, you have the right to ask for what you want and get what you want. And if it doesn't work, it's not on the coordinator, it's on the head coach.
Are we going to know pretty quickly what DeFilippo wasn't doing right when we see the game plan this week when they play? Are we going to see a difference enough where we're going to say that's what they were trying to do or that's what Zimmer wanted to do?
I would imagine it's going to skew one direction or the other. And as Cris said, when there was that change and someone, it was
you err on the side of
you're going to give him. You want runs? Here they are, and here they are in bulk. And during the game, as a head coach, you may say, okay, pull it back a little bit and adjust it as you go. But yeah, I'd imagine you'll get what Zimmer wanted.
This is my concern in Minnesota. And, Coach, I know you're a fan of continuity. In this league, it's very, very important. Vikings last 3 years, 4 different offensive coordinators. Norv Turner, a guy I respect. I met with Norv. He's now calling plays for Carolina Panthers. He's still in the league. He didn't quit coaching because he didn't want to coach. There was something going on there. So, yeah, I respect Zim. The Wolfe family, they've invested. That's their head coach. And they're allowing him to pick. But they got to get that offensive side of the ball figured out. And also, I believe that his stress, he's been stressing about the offense, it's affected how the defense is playing. Last year, number 1. This year, number 11. So whoever he turns it over to him, I hope he can just concentrate on the defense because that's where Zim has made his mark in this league for a long time.
Here's the ironic thing is Pat Schumer, I think, ran the ball at the highest percentage of anybody last year, and he's the one that got the head coaching job. So it wasn't about the passing game.
Great point.
He did what Minnesota wants to do, who they want to be, and how did it work out? They had team success. He had personal success, and he moved on to a head coaching job.
And that also set up Case Keenum in the best position possible, where Case played way over his skis last year because he wasn't being asked to throw the ball like Cousins is 2 out of every 3 plays. It was 1 out of every 2 because they were running the ball nearly 48% of the time last year. So in that regard, now a lot of things went well for the Vikings last year, but in that regard, that worked well for Keenum got paid, Shermer got a head coaching job, the team went 13-3. Everything went well in that regard.
No, the Vikings didn't. We didn't get no Super Bowl.
Okay, well, fair enough. It was a solid season despite that, but I understand your point.
You so much.
Yeah,
well, because you didn't need to. Everyone knew they didn't win a Super Bowl. See,
everyone didn't get paid.
Can we not let Kirk Cousins off the hook either?
Listen, I'm with you, Coach.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.